Where is it? Let's see. Ah, Stolen Memories. Thanks, Brainiac. Check. Checkity bum bum body boo. Hello friends, welcome back to the show. So glad to see you once again. And if you're new here, I hope that you'll stick around, hit subscribe, because we're talking about each and every episode of Superman, the animated series. We previously went through all the episodes of Batman. Now it's time to dip our toes into Superman.
Who else wants a piece?
At this point, we're about halfway through the first season, and you can really tell that the writers are trying to find their footing to establish stories that work for Superman. And this episode, as we bring Brainiac back into the storyline, really starts to move this series in a intergalactic space travel, other worlds kind of storylines. More sci-fi, I would say. And I like that. That truly is what I remember most about Superman, that the stories dealt more with aliens and off-world and sci-fi topics. And that's certainly the case with this one as we talk about Stolen Memories, which originally aired on November 2nd, 1996.
But what's the story here? I'm not sure, Jimmy, except that Luthor is supposed to be meeting someone.
Now, before I get into the meat of this episode, I do want to make a correction to something that I said in the Last Son of Krypton episode that was brought to my attention by one of our viewers, BK McGlynn. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But they brought to my attention that when I was speaking about the composer, Michael McCluhan, and gave him a lot of credit for composing the music of that episode, BK pointed out to me that Michael McCluhan was one of a team of composers that included Shirley Walker that composed the music for the episodes, as was tradition for a lot of TV shows in that period of time. So Michael McCluhan may have had a part or a piece to do with the composition of the music in that episode, but certainly was not the only composer that worked on that episode. So I wanted to be sure that I give credit where credit is due, because I was really impressed with that music, and it wasn't just Michael McCluhan that was responsible for it, but it was a team of people. So thank you, BK McGlynn, for pointing that out. I stand corrected. Now, getting back into this episode, I'm going to put the 60-second Joker Bomb clock up on the screen to be able to give you a rundown of the episode in 60 seconds or less. I'm not good at this, but we'll give it a shot. Lex Luthor has made contact with Brainiac and makes a deal with him to trade knowledge of Earth for knowledge of other planets. And Superman has his doubts and goes, oh, we better not do that. We can't trust him. And when Superman goes to meet with Brainiac to talk with him personally, he sees all his orbs of all his knowledge of all these other worlds. And he touches the one from Krypton and gets some visions about what he's doing, and sees Jor-El in there. And he still has his doubts. And he goes home and he has this trippy dream about how Brainiac's not all he says he is. And he goes to Luthor and says, we shouldn't trust him. This isn't a good idea. And Luthor goes, oh, I don't trust anybody completely because I got all these rockets pointed at his ship. And Superman goes into the ship and he touches the orb again and learns more that Brainiac is getting knowledge from sucking all this knowledge from these planets and then destroys them. But by that time, Brainiac has already created a uplink to take control of Luthor's Lex Corp pipeline. And he's sucking all this and has all the access to all the defense systems throughout the globe. And so Superman punches his way out and Lex Luthor shuts down his system. And before Superman gets out, he takes the orb from... I'm getting much closer, I'll tell you that much. But before Superman gets out, he takes the orb of Krypton and places it safely into the Fortress of Solitude.
Powers such as yours should not be confined to a single infinitesimal dot.
I have to admit, I didn't realize or remember how many episodes Lex Luthor was in. I mean, here we are in the 6th episode, and I think he's been in all but 1 or 2, maybe? Which I guess makes sense, because he's really the main mastermind to go up against Superman. And we've talked about it before, but here we have Superman, who's all about strength and power and physical abilities. And then we have Lex Luthor, who is a mastermind and has this brain power and is all evil, where Superman is all good and is very selfish, where Superman is very selfless. So we have a great dynamic between the two characters of just polar opposites. And so it makes sense that he's driving a lot of the stories behind what's putting Superman in harm's way.
Why me?
Because I told him all about you. and he's most anxious to meet our Man of Steel.
And to me, this episode is really where the series starts getting into their stride. If you notice by the airing order, the first 5 episodes pretty much all aired in September of 1996. And now there was a break, and this episode didn't air until November. So I'm sure that there was a bit of a break there and some writing sessions and regrouping and things like that. And to me, this episode is more in par of what I think of when I think back to the Superman, the animated series episodes, is these off-the-planet, intergalactic, broad stories, worlds in peril kind of storylines, and otherworldly creatures like Brainiac that comes in and is threatening the entire planet, and Superman is the one to save that.
These orbs contain all the knowledge I've collected. Each represents all the recorded information from a single planet.
Now, if you remember back to some of my episodes for Batman the Animated Series, I spoke a lot about how I didn't care much for the episodes of Batman that took us outside of Gotham City and had Batman kind of facing off against some world threat, which is kind of my issue with some of the Ra's al Ghul episodes. But I have to admit, it's like the total opposite for Superman. When I sit down and watch an episode of Superman, I love this kind of sci-fi space travel elements to Superman.
5.5 light years, just past Alpha Centauri.
In less than 4 hours. Remarkable.
I enjoy seeing him defend Metropolis, but it's almost like there isn't a big enough threat. In those previous episodes, the villains that he was faced off against was not as much of a threat. It was just him coming in, punching his way through this, and moving on with his life. But now it feels like the writers are finding excuses to really put Superman to the test. And this episode certainly is that Brainiac is coming down to suck all the knowledge from planet Earth and then destroy it. And Superman has to stop that.
You destroyed those planets, didn't you? And every living soul on them.
Only their knowledge was important.
But we still get plenty of Batman punching his way out of things. And I have to say, Superman punching his way out of things. And we certainly get some of that when he's on the ship and especially when he first arrives and he's beating up some robots in that. But only Superman can intimidate a group of robots.
I'm waiting.
We also get to see a great sequence here when Superman's punching the beam that's coming out there, which is a very reminiscent image that I remember from the Max Fletcher Superman cartoons. And I wouldn't put it past Bruce Timm and the team at all to throw back a little bit to Max Fletcher, as that was a huge influence for them in these animated series.
Show's not over yet.
If I had to find a complaint about this episode, which I don't have to, but I'm going to, the dream sequence that Superman has after touching the orb and he starts having all these visions of what's going on in Krypton and these other planets and how Brainiac destroyed them. I mean, we needed to get to that information that Superman has his doubts about what Brainiac's motives are or what he's going to do with this knowledge. But at the same time, I feel like there could have been a better device. To me, in writing, the cheap way out is a dream sequence or a and then he woke up kind of moment. And so I wish they would have come up with something a little bit more inventive for Superman to get that information. But that whole sequence was just a little trippy when he was walking through this dream world of what Brainiac's really trying to do.
Farewell, Krypton.
Whereas I feel like I would normally have an issue with Brainiac coming back into the series this early, I feel like it was necessary because what I appreciate about Brainiac as a villain, a bit of my concerns about some of the previous episodes, is that he is a formidable threat, a real foe to go up against Superman. One, because he has a connection to Superman's history of Krypton.
I am Krypton.
And so there's that connection between the two of them, that Brainiac was not responsible for blowing up the planet, but was there when that happened, gleamed an opportunity to draw that knowledge from Krypton, and is an adversary for Superman, but also has information that Superman wants or needs about his home planet.
Help me explore the galaxies and collect knowledge, and I will give you memories of Krypton. You will know your world as if you lived there yourself.
And just like Superman and Lex Luthor are kind of polar opposites, same thing with Brainiac. Brainiac is completely ruthless, has no regard for any life, especially human life, and is an alien type being, whereas Superman is also an alien being and is now adopted the planet Earth as his home planet. And I love that there's that part of that. Superman could also feel the same way and go, yeah, Earth's not my home, so I don't care what happens to them, but he doesn't feel that way.
But Earth is my home now.
This is why he cares about all these people and these other lives that are at stake for this, and has a fundamental disagreement with Brainiac. And to top it all off, Brainiac has this knowledge of all these other worlds to be able to face Superman and fight against him in that regard. So it's strength versus brains in this case. Brainiac.
The fewer beings who have the knowledge, the more precious it becomes.
You're insane.
And I also just love at the end of this episode that we start to tease the Fortress of Solitude. I don't remember how this came to be in the Superman episode, so I'm kind of experiencing it for the first time. But I love this tease that he pulls the orb from the ship before it goes down and places it in this ice place, this ice structure. And so I can only assume that he's going to take that information from the orb to create the Fortress of Solitude and have that connection with Krypton through that. It's pretty cool.
I knew this place had possibilities.
So when it comes time to rank this episode, this is more in line with what I've been wanting to see out of Superman. Yes, I'm a huge fan of film noir and detectives and all those elements, and Batman is certainly responsible for instilling that love in me. However, I'm also a huge fan of sci-fi and intergalactic stories and kind of that out of this world type of plot lines, and that's what this episode introduces. So I ended up putting it at the number 2 spot of my favorite episodes so far. So I do place it just below The Way of the Flesh because Metallo is a much more human villain, and I think that we get to play around with a little bit of that kind of story. Not necessarily a tragic villain, because he's certainly a bad guy, but there's another dynamic to his character as a fleshed out villain, fleshed out with a metal undertone. Even though that's a simpler, takes place in Metropolis type of episode, that to me has all the right components of just a really solid story. But it certainly beats out Fun and Games because there just isn't a threat in Fun and Games. Toyman's a neat villain, but just not a good threat against Superman.
Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer.
Precisely. Although in your case, I will make an exception.
So let me know, do you agree with me that you like to see Superman in kind of these intergalactic sort of storylines, or do you like it better when he's just in Metropolis facing the foes of the day? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and hit that like button. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to hit subscribe because I have new episodes coming out every Tuesday and Thursday, and next up, we have the 2-parter, The Main Man. So you don't want to miss that. As always, I'm Andy Knode. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.